Good afternoon, and thank you all for being here today. As you know, we had our press conference on Tuesday, and we didn't announce one on Thursday, but I decided to call this press conference to present my recommendations for the American Rescue Plan funding. You may hear me refer to it as ARP, but that's what I'm talking about, that Louisiana should receive in May. We're expecting it somewhere around the 10th of May, not just the funding, but the final rules that pertain to the ways that can be spent and cannot be spent and so forth. I am very happily joined today by Lieutenant Governor Billy Nungesser. Also with us, we have the Chair of the House Transportation Committee, Vincent Pierre. Representative Pierre, it's good to have you, and also Representative Barbara Carpenter, who's the Chair of the House Labor Committee. Point Capee Parish President Major Tebow is here. Renee Laparolari with the Department of Transportation and Development. Jill Kidder, President of the Louisiana Travel Association, and Bobby Baruch, who is the CFO of Elmer Chocolate, which I will point out is in Ponchatoula, Louisiana, Tangipahoa Parish. Although we are still obviously waiting on certain guidance regarding the spending of these dollars, I'm required to certify to the Secretary of the Treasury that the funds will be used for the purposes specified in the Act and in accordance with the rules and the guidance that get promulgated by the Secretary of the Treasury. And I've signed that certification. We've sent that letter to Secretary Yellen because I want to make sure that as soon as those funds are available, that they get sent to the state of Louisiana. I'm excited now to share with you the proposals that we are making that will help Louisiana to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic and restore the progress and that we'd been making before 2020. I will tell you we're already well on our way. And just a quick reminder, before the pandemic, at the beginning of 2020, Louisiana had one of its lowest rates of unemployment in history. And then almost overnight, we lost 281,000 jobs. By December of 2020, we had recaptured about 200,000 of those jobs. Pre-pandemic, so this is, again, at the start of 2020, Louisiana's GDP had been growing. We were the largest ever in terms of the size of our economy, with a GDP over $250 billion on an annual basis, about $260 billion. We also had the fourth fastest growing economy in the country. At our COVID-19 bottom, our economy was generating only 86% of the pre-pandemic economic output. Today, we're back to more than 94% of pre-COVID levels and steadily growing. So there's no doubt that Louisiana is on the mend, but we still need some help in order to make a full recovery. And that really is the whole purpose for the American Rescue Plan. And so I want to thank President Biden. I want to thank Congress for making the funds available for the country and particularly to Louisiana. I have requested in the certification that I sent to Secretary Yellen no less than $1.6 billion, which is approximately half of the amount allocated to Louisiana. The other half will be allocated to us over the next 2 years, and we're not sure exactly how that's going to be apportioned yet. First and foremost, with respect to putting these dollars to use, I am proposing that $230 million be allocated for the purpose of reimbursing the federal government for the loans that we've had to make in order for the Louisiana Workforce Commission to continue to pay unemployment benefits to Louisiana citizens. An additional $400 million will be used to replenish the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund. So that's $630 million for unemployment purposes. As I've said before, this has to be a priority in order to restore the solvency of the UI Trust Fund and to protect employers all over the state. Every employer who pays into the UI Trust Fund will otherwise, at some point in the very near future, have a tax increase. I don't believe it's ever a good thing to have a tax increase when you're trying to grow your economy, come out of a pandemic. So I think this is very important. To put this in perspective, before the pandemic, we had one of the strongest UI trust funds in the country. In March of last year, before we started paying out pandemic-related benefits, the trust fund had over $1 billion in it. And then if you fast forward, by October of 2020, we had to start borrowing from the federal government in order to pay claims. The UI Trust Fund has hit zero, and we now have $184 million in loans that we have to pay back. And it's projected that that amount will increase to $230 million, which is why I put $230 million towards repaying that loan. Obviously, our goal is to get back to the pre-pandemic level of the UI Trust Fund, but specifically using ARP funds, it's the $630 million that I just pointed out to you. And over 2 years, it's going to be very important that we get to at least $750 million, because any amount below that, when the September REC recognizes that fund as having a balance below $750 million, then there will be a tax increase. And so that's why we're going to do this over 2 years, and it will be necessary again to suspend the increase that would otherwise occur in 2021. We can do that and without having to worry about any adverse impact on the fund, because we know we have more ARP funds next year. Moving beyond the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund, I am next proposing $400 million for infrastructure projects. Transportation is the foundation for so much of our economy, but it's also about safety, it's about quality of life. It is how we get economic investment, job creation in our state, how we move commerce. Just recently, we announced $216 million in road and infrastructure projects using funds from the 2020 Coronavirus Response and Relief Supplemental Appropriations Act. And since 2016, my administration has invested more than $3.9 billion into infrastructure projects. Our goal for these additional funds would include addressing longstanding projects that have been on the books for years, meaning our priority program, creating and sustaining jobs across the state, and chipping away at our $14 billion infrastructure backlog that has continued to grow while funding has lagged. You know, the COVID-19 pandemic not only reduced state revenue, including the Transportation Trust Fund, but it also caused financial hardships for inland and deep water ports. And because of the contributions that our ports make to our economy, and in fact, there is not a better return on any investment the state makes than what we put into ports. For that reason, I propose to allocate $50 million to ports to help in their recovery. Dr. Sean Wilson is unable to be with us today to address these priorities, but the Multimodal Commissioner, Renee Laparoli, will speak in just a moment about the value of this $50 million investment, which is designed to replace revenue that was lost by the ports during the pandemic, but they've not been eligible for previous stimulus funds like the CARES Act. And it would be our recommendation that we do this in a manner similar to the way we administered the CARES Act last year for local government. So the Division of Administration would set up a program, the ports come in and show their lost revenue, and then they would draw against the $50 million in a very similar fashion. I'm also recommending that $300 million be directed to sewage and water projects, with $100 million each going to the Louisiana Department of Health Drinking Water Revolving Loan Fund, the DEQ Clean Water State Revolving Loan Fund, and the OCD, the Office of Community Development Public Facilities Program. And though we call these revolving loan funds, once the projects are done and all the commitments are made, the loan becomes a grant. And a working group has already been created earlier this week with representatives of the three agencies that I just mentioned, but also with the House and the Senate. And they've been charged with developing specific recommendations, guidelines, and rules for the distribution of these dollars. And a goal is to leverage the state ARP dollars for local dollars to make sure that we actually tackle even more of our infrastructure related to water and sewer. Over 50% of Louisiana's water systems have infrastructure that is over 50 years old. They are expensive to repair and modernize, but they are absolutely essential to a healthy community. Out of 1,287 water systems in Louisiana, 260 of them are under formal enforcement. That's 20% of all of our water systems. What that means is that there are violations regarding water quality standards, infrastructure problems, operations, and/or maintenance issues. Our drinking water infrastructure was graded at a D- in the latest ASCE report, and about 400 of our systems were affected by the recent record winter storm. As you probably know, President Biden and Congress put an emphasis on water and sewage projects when they passed the American Rescue Plan, and I wholeheartedly agree with them. This is something we've been working on since our very first days in office. And we certainly need to take advantage of the opportunity that we have to make significant headway on this issue. And while we're talking primarily about the state's ARP funding, it is noteworthy that there's $2 billion going to local government as well, and one of the specified purposes for which that funding can be spent and invested is water and sewer also. Next, I'm recommending that $125 million be set aside for local convention and visitor bureaus, as well as other tourism venues that were not able to take advantage of other federal grant programs to assist them with their lost revenues. Additionally, I believe it's important that $20 million be provided to the Department of Culture, Recreation, and Tourism to aggressively market the state to make up for lost tourism dollars. This is incredibly important to jumpstarting our economy and getting more customers into our businesses. Tourism economics estimates, I should say, that Louisiana lost approximately $5 billion in tourism spending over the past year. We estimate that Mardi Gras 2021 alone would have generated more than $1 billion in economic impact. In May and June of 2020, we lost an estimated $750 million in economic impact from festivals, sporting events, and conventions statewide. But we are turning a new page today. And the Lieutenant Governor is going to tell you more about how we are going to get tourism back up and running. And I will take questions at the end when I come back up to the podium. But I'll be followed now by Lieutenant Governor Billy Nungesser. He will be followed by Parish President Major Tebow, and then Jill Kidder, Renee Laparoli, and Bobby Baruch in that order. So, Billy.
Thank you, Governor. Let me first thank you, Governor, and your team and our tourism team around Louisiana for the incredible work and support we've had over the last 4 years prior to COVID. Prior to COVID, we had 4 record-breaking years in tourism. In 2019, 51.3 million visitors came to Louisiana. They left behind $1.9 billion in taxes. That's a little over $1,100 per Louisiana family that you and I didn't have to pay. Now, as we open our doors back up to the world, we have a plan. We call it the Sunshine Plan because we see light at the end of the tunnel, and it's a bright light. It's a 4-part plan. First is a staycation, which many Louisianans have been doing safely, wearing their masks through part of the shutdown, visiting parts of Louisiana that they hadn't seen before. And I thank them for that. It kept many businesses afloat during these tough times. The second part is regional trips. That's the drive market. If you've seen the commercials, stay 3 nights at a state park and get the 4th night free, wildly successful across Louisiana, and has driven us to our best year ever in state parks by that 4th night free, and it's been working. The next phase is going to be a little tougher. It's the long-haul trips. While 87% of Americans plan a leisure trip in the next 3 to 6 months, they're not going far from home. They're going to be traveling shorter and closer to home. And the last part of that is the international market. We're not ready to begin to market that yet, but when they're ready to travel, we'll be ready for them here in Louisiana. We know it's important to support and promote every part of this state, every fair and festival, to make sure the restaurants, shops, hotels, and attractions not only get back open, but start making money quickly, because you can only stay open and lose money for so long. This weekend, we're kicking off, actually today, we're kicking off the Crawfish Fest in St. Bernard. So I'm asking everyone to get out and have a great weekend here in Louisiana. Take a staycation. After all, it's yours. Governor, thank you again for your support and your team and our tourism team around the state. These record-breaking numbers will be back soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. First of all, on behalf of the citizens I represent in Poincapie Parish, I want to thank you, Governor, for your recommendations. I want to speak particularly about the Sewer and Water Grant Program. You often hear that across the United States we have an infrastructure crisis, and I can tell you in Louisiana, at least where I come from and where I represent in Poincapie, you learn pretty quickly that sewer and water is where that infrastructure crisis lies. The governor was correct. Many of these systems were built 40 and 50 years ago. Many of these systems were built with federal funds, with the right intentions. They were built in many cases in low-income areas, and the low rates that were set were really not sustainable. What this grant program does is it allows us the opportunity for parishes across the state to apply for this program so that we can upgrade our sewer system, so that we can replace broken lines, so that we can replace broken pumps that I can promise you have been limping along for some time. This allows, for us to create a safer place for our folks to live. And it's a much-needed boost. Water systems are, in a rural parish like I represent, and talking to other parish presidents and police jurymen across Louisiana, our water systems are our greatest challenge. Same things. We need new towers. They're very expensive. New lines, very expensive. The $300 million will go a long way and at least gives us an opportunity to start to do something about that critical infrastructure of sewer and water. So I thank you for the recommendations. We as a parish look forward to trying to apply for some of those funds and restore our systems to where they should be for the people who live in this great state. Thank you, and thank you for the program.
Hello, everybody. I'm Jill Kidder. I'm with the Louisiana Travel Association, Louisiana Association of Convention and Visitors Bureaus, and I will also want to add our thank you to Governor Edwards and his team. We are so honored to be here representing our members who are those convention and visitors bureaus, attractions, hotels, restaurants, main streets, and parks all across our state. And I don't have to tell you that these small businesses and these organizations have been devastated by COVID over this last year. But please allow me to also acknowledge our industry's passionate and tireless leader, Lieutenant Governor Nungesser, who has led us through this crisis so well. And of course, all of you for being here today and including our industry in this important conversation. It's an honor to stand here as we discuss how to bring back Louisiana's jobs and our important economy. We also want to thank you for recognizing the importance of providing dollars to tourism and convention marketing, for creating products and services that will attract our visitors, and for improving our facilities that also bring visitors to our destinations. These funds will help us bring back jobs and local and state tax revenues that the Lieutenant Governor talked about. Timing for this support is critical at this point. And as we enter into what we all know will be the most competitive tourism and travel marketplace in history, yes, there is a lot of pent-up demand, and we all want to travel again, but every other destination in the Southeast, the country, and also the world will be vying for our visitors and our convention attendees. So it is important that this funding comes now. Providing funding to this industry at this time will help us ensure that all Louisiana destinations are top of mind to these visitors, and this is a great start. So what we also want to ask all of our fellow Louisianans, if you'll allow me, Governor, we need their help in 3 different ways. One is to invite your friends and family, as the Lieutenant Governor said, to come visit and experience your Louisiana. We also know that all of our folks in Louisiana are members of associations, organizations, or businesses, and we'd like for you to ask them to hold their next available conference or convention in Louisiana. Meetings are back, and we are so glad that they are. Be a visitor. Number 3 is do that staycation that the Lieutenant Governor asked you about. Be your visitor in your own state. And in closing, on behalf of the Louisiana Travel Association, the Louisiana Association of Convention and Visitors Bureaus, and the entire statewide travel industry, we pledge to be good stewards of this money. And we will all look forward to working with our governor, our lieutenant governor, our legislators, and all of our elected leaders back in our destinations to bring back Louisiana. So thank you, Governor.
Thank you very much.
My name's Bobby Baruch with Elmer Candy. First of all, I hope everyone got to celebrate the Easter season with Goldberg egg and heavenly hash. I must say I'm always a welcome visitor as long as I bring candy. Governor, I'd like to thank you for the proposal to fund the unemployment insurance fund. You know, that's almost $1 billion that would be an additional tax on the businesses of Louisiana. And as we try to bring our businesses back and bring the economy back, that's one challenge that we don't have to face. There are many others, but that one helps tremendously in letting us do what we know best, which is our own business. You know, we know how to make candy. That's what we want to concentrate on. We don't want to have to fool with the rules and regulations on the unemployment trust fund. So we appreciate that funding. And I must say that having been in Louisiana since 1855 and in Tangipahoa Parish since 1970, you know, we've been here a long time. We think with these funds that will help our business grow, and we hope to be in Louisiana for another 150 years. So thank you, Governor.
Thank you, Bobby.
Thank you, Governor. Good afternoon. Although the American Rescue Plan Act did not contain specific COVID-19 relief funds for seaports, there is language in the state and local funding sections of the Act that expressly permits the transfer of these relief funds by governors who know the value of ports. So for that, we thank you. Through the leadership of the Ports Association of Louisiana, the case was made to me and Secretary Wilson to help our ports recover from loss of revenue due to the pandemic, which has restricted the ability of public port authorities to invest in capital projects. And Governor Edwards, I see a pattern. Your willingness to immediately support the ports in a way that will sustain them and keep them whole, your commitment of the state's share toward the dredging of the Mississippi River to 50 feet from the mouth of the river to the greater Baton Rouge port, and other critical dredging projects. realizing the importance of us being strategic on how we plan our investments to enhance competitively on the global market, advance competitively. The state's ports are the lifeline for much of the world, handling 60% of the nation's grain and carrying 25% of U.S. waterborne commerce. And so many of our ports have that critical intermodal connectivity with trucking routes, rail, and airports. This pattern makes clear our commitment to business and industry, which will in turn meet us with private investments, allowing Louisiana to build upon the innovation and skill which people of this state have contributed nationally and internationally to the maritime industry for generations. Governor, it seems that everywhere I go, you have already been. This week was Morgan City, where Captain Les Rolfe and Max send their regards. I'll be in Fouchon tomorrow, in Lake Providence, St. Joseph, and Vidalia next week. So I want to thank the Ports Association for working with us. And on behalf of the Ports Association, inland and coastal, shallow and deep draft, our federal partners, the maritime industry, and all related industry, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank all of you for being here today and for speaking. And I hope you noticed that even though $3.2 billion sounds like, and in fact is, a lot of money, if we wanted to have transformative, positive change in our state, you can't do everything. And you can't cut this pie into 100 pieces and think that you're going to make a significant improvement anywhere. And so with this $1.6 billion, you see three main investment areas. First, the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund. Second, infrastructure, including roads, bridges, water, sewer, ports. And then thirdly, tourism. It is my belief that these are the three most important things that we can do right now, and that this plan is the best plan for using these funds for their intended purpose and to have a transformative, positive impact for the state of Louisiana. I would also tell you what is obviously the case, and that is we will receive more ARP funds next year, and many of these investments will be carried over into a second year as well, especially the Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund and infrastructure. And then I've got a commitment with the Lieutenant Governor to sit down with him after this first injection funding of tourism and see where we are and whether additional funds for tourism will be necessary next year. Before I take questions, I do have an update that's important from the Department of Health on COVID-19 variants in Louisiana. Unfortunately, as of today, there are 2 confirmed cases of the P1 or the Brazil variant in our state. This is the first time we have confirmed cases of the Brazil variant. One case was identified in Region 1, which is the greater New Orleans area. The second was identified in Region 5, which is southwest Louisiana, centered around Lake Charles. The cases are not travel related, and what that means is it is almost certain that there are other individuals in Louisiana with COVID-19 caused by these same variants. And now there are multiple variants of concern circulating in Louisiana. B117, which is the UK variant, B1427/429, the California variant, and now the P1 Brazil variant. I would also point out that the 2 individuals had not been vaccinated. I also learned today of a recent breakout of 13 cases in Louisiana from one funeral. And I say that because a lot of people think that we have put this pandemic behind us, that there's not a threat out there anymore. That simply is not the case. And all of these cases further underscore the need for everyone 16 and older to get vaccinated as soon as possible. There are 3 safe and effective vaccines available. They are free. They are easy to access. We have over 1,500 locations operating in Louisiana today where people can get their vaccine. If you have questions or need to make an appointment, you can call 1-855-453-0774 or visit covidvaccine.la.gov for more information. The hotline is open from 8 to 8 on Monday through Saturday and noon to 8 on Sundays. Quick update, nearly 1.5 million Louisianans have initiated their vaccines. Over 1 million have completed their vaccine series. We've administered nearly 2.5 million total vaccine doses. So we are making progress, but we are not where we need to be. The vaccines are our best defense against the pandemic and the best chance to put it behind us as soon as possible, but that requires people getting vaccine. And the sooner the better, because the race between the vaccines and the variants are real. And this is what we and other places around the country have been going through for some time. And so remember, wearing a mask and social distancing are still recommended by the CDC. I do want to close on some different news, I think a sign of progress. For quite some time, our state has been dealing with multiple emergencies from COVID to recover from hurricanes and winter storms. You may remember we had 3 hurricanes make landfall last year. As a result of all of these disasters, many people were displaced from their homes. At the peak of the disasters, there were 18,213 evacuees in Louisiana and in Texas, and almost 13,000 of these were in 58 non-congregant shelters in Louisiana. What that means is hotels. More than 450 Department of Children and Family Services staff, along with supporting agencies and partners, managed the operations for a record 8 months, which included moving thousands of Hurricane Laura evacuees to safety and securing their non-congregant shelter space virtually overnight. Over the past several months, staff have worked with the remaining evacuees to plan their recovery and to find sustainable housing solutions. And as of today, I can tell you that we no longer have anyone in any of the non-congregant shelters that were set up. We've had people in shelters now since about the 26th of August until today. This has never been done before, and I will tell you, we have some very dedicated, professional, caring public servants at the Department of Children and Family Services and all the other agencies and private sector and nonprofit partners who came together to make sure that these people were taken care of. So with that, I'm going to take a few questions if you have them. Yes, sir.
I was wondering if you talk about how broadband fits into this, if it's part of infrastructure. I know you recently created a new office, and there's a bill to put $180 million in ARP funding into broadband.
Yeah. So you're right. We have $180 million in a separate pot of funds that will go to broadband, expanding broadband, particularly in rural, unserved areas. We have tremendous need there. And we also have an infrastructure package that has taken shape in Washington. And no matter whose package you look at, whether it's House, Senate, Republican, or Democrat, broadband is a common component. And so we are optimistic that a package will pass at some point of some size that will have considerable funding for additional broadband efforts. If that doesn't happen, then I would expect that broadband could be a draw on next year's ARP money. But the $180 million that we have is more than enough for the first year of this program in order to establish the program and make really good headway in providing broadband, high-speed internet access that is affordable across much of rural Louisiana. So we're staging this in, but I think you got it exactly right when you talked about the $180 million that's currently available for us. Yes, ma'am.
The $300 million going to sewer and water, do you think that's going to be enough to address the state's problems? And if not,
no, it's
okay.
not. But when we leverage it for a match for example, from the locals that have ARP funding of their own that can be spent for water and sewer, then you get more projects done. But also you have another year coming, water and sewer, and it's also water and sewer included in the same federal infrastructure package that I was just referring to as well. So we have more opportunities there, but the answer to your question is no, because we literally have, I think it's about $900 million worth of water and sewer projects that we don't get into the capital construction bill, House Bill 2, the capital outlay bill, because we just simply don't have the capacity. But by doing what we currently have in capital outlay through the capital outlay process, bringing this $300 million to bear this year, additional funding next year, and on top of that, whatever comes out of the federal infrastructure bill for water and sewer, we have a it's not even once in a generation. This is, I don't know, once in a 100-year opportunity to make significant advances in water and sewer, which is a tremendous problem all across the state of Louisiana.
I know municipalities and localities have to apply, but is there going to be like a prioritization? Like, is it going to be based on how big your problem is, or first come, first served?
Yeah, well, first of all, I can't answer the question yet because we have individuals from DEQ, which has the revolving loan fund for sewer, LDH, which has the revolving loan fund for water, and the Office of Community Development. Individuals from those agencies are meeting with legislators from the House and the Senate to come up with a plan, because there are several things that we have to do. We have to leverage for local funding, but we also have to make sure that we're consolidating small water systems that are close together when that makes the best sense for the long-term sustainability of that system. And so there's an awful lot of work left to be done. But we know this is what we want to do, and we started the work, and it didn't make sense for us to wait until after all the rules come out. And so I'm not able to address those questions, but that is the very work of that body that I just mentioned, and they've already started. Yes, sir.
You said previously that you've been meeting with President Cortez and Speaker Scheck-Snyder. How confident are you that this plan will align with their priorities for how to spend this money, or where do you think there could be some disagreements?
Well, I'm hopeful that it completely aligns with their priorities. You know, if we can agree on the big things, then obviously there's room for compromise. There always is. But one of the things that I think we should all try to guard against is having everybody's pet project, pet initiative funded from these dollars, because then you're not going to have the transformative impact anywhere, which is why we were, I think, very disciplined in the way that we did this, because we're focusing on really 3 areas and that are extremely important to our state. Not just right now. I think that the UI Trust Fund is critically important now because of the pandemic. And coming out of the pandemic, we shouldn't put a tax increase on all these businesses. But the other opportunities we have, you know, these problems have been developing for decades. Roads and bridges, there's a $14 billion backlog. You know, we've got all these aging water systems that are failing, and quite frankly, there are not the resources out there, absent funding opportunities like this, to make these sort of advances. And so I would hope that this meets with their approval. We have had lots of conversations. I can tell you there's nothing that I mentioned today that will surprise them at all, but I don't want to speak for them either. Yes, ma'am.
How can you give more details about how the money for the visitors and convention bureaus will be divided?
So what I would like you to think back to is when we had the CARES Act funding for local government, and we created a program administered by the Division of Administration, and they created the rules, and the local government came in and showed what their revenue losses were, and COVID-related expenditures, I should say, not revenue losses. But they were able to then get funded for those losses once they were certified. Well, that wasn't available to the Convention and Visitor Bureaus, and in this round of funding, revenue loss is specifically reimbursable through these funds. And so we're going to do this on a revenue loss basis, and they're going to come to the Division of Administration show what their revenue losses were, and they will get their losses or their per capita share of the $125 million, which is there for the Convention and Visitor Bureaus, but it's also there for tourism venues. And that will happen in that fashion too, with respect to those venues. And then the other part of this will operate in the same fashion will be the ports. So they come to the Division of Administration and bring their information related to loss of revenue, and then they will get their revenue funded, loss of revenue, I should say, funded through this means, or at least up to their per capita share of the $50 million. So it's going to work much like the CARES Act local funding from last year. Yes, sir, we'll do it.
What do you make of the call from the Legislative Black Caucus that Representative Garofalo stepped down from heading the Education Committee? Do you think he's fit to serve as chair of the Education Committee?
Well, I think it is obvious and incontrovertible that he made some very unfortunate statements that have caused a significant number of his colleagues to lose confidence in him. And it's my understanding that those colleagues span both sides of the aisle. They have had conversations with Representative Garofalo and with the Speaker, and obviously it's the Speaker's decision if he's going to make any changes. I believe that the incident is egregious enough to warrant his removal, but I'm also the first to tell you I'm not the one that makes that decision. So look, thank you all very much. Representative Carpenter, Representative Pierre, appreciate you being here, and I look forward to your work on labor and transportation to make these things happen and make sure that we move Louisiana forward and out of this pandemic and recover all of the momentum that we had just a little over a year ago. So thank you all very much. God bless.